welcome to the big show. I am your host, Kevin Noon, and it is game week, believe it or not. The long off season here it's over. It's over. It's game week. Ohio State is going to be playing this week on Thursday at Minnesota at Huntington Bank Stadium. We got to see a little bit of action earlier this week in terms of Big Ten with Illinois taking it to Nebraska in a game that probably was a little sloppier than anybody would like to see, but that's week one, and we will talk about that here in a second as we do our opponent preview. And it's a big thing to be able to go out and get some ideas of what it is that Ohio State's going to be facing. We cover Ohio State at length. We know what Ohio State's about. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen because we haven't really seen anything yet, and, things go week to week. So, we're going to welcome in a friend of the show. We're going to welcome in Sean Williams of Minnesota.Rivals.com, obviously part of the Rivals.com network, who is a friend of mine, somebody that I've known for several years. Sean, welcome to the show.
Kevin, it's an honor to be on your show, man. Happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. And, before we kind of get into the X's and O's, just how excited are people around the Minnesota program to get out there and have some football, have an opportunity to maybe put that 3-4 season from last year behind them, hoping that was an outlier and that 2019 is more of what is to be expected out of this program. How excited are people to get back to it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement around the team this year. Obviously, with the amount of experience they've got coming back, they're a little bit deeper in areas of need that they struggled in last year. So they've got more depth there through the transfer portal. And obviously you've got guys like Tanner Morgan, Ibrahim coming back. So there's a lot of excitement around this team. I think they've cleaned up the special teams in terms of kicking and punting this year. They brought in some help there. So I know Fleck has said on a few occasions in his press conferences, he's really excited about this year's team for all the reasons I just stated. And obviously they want to kind of forget what happened last year with 3-4 and maybe go back to the success that they had in 2019. And I think they got a pretty good team to do that this year, just considering everything they've got back and the amount of talent and the depth that they have.
Everybody talks about Minnesota and just the number of returners that they have, but then also Minnesota was very active in the transfer portal. So I always warn people when they're like, well, you got 21 returning starters or whatever. Well, does that mean anything if those 21 returning starters didn't necessarily get the job done? Yes, they're a year more developed, they're a year older and everything else, but then you see Minnesota going to Clemson to get Niles Pickney. You see them going to Abilene Christian to pick up a linebacker. You see them hitting the portal to try and fill in some gaps. How do you kind of measure that of returning experience, but also going out and trying to maybe fix some deficiencies?
No, it's a valid question because obviously defensively it was a huge struggle for them, especially at the beginning of the year against Michigan and Maryland. They gave up a lot of yards, especially and they just weren't tackling well in the open field, taking bad angles, things like that. Now you've seen the defense tighten up a little bit as the season went on, but still not a defense they were really happy with. And I think they kind of expected that to a degree, but I think it really hit them in the face against Michigan and Maryland for sure. And then they've kind of, like I said, got a little bit better as the season went on. But linebacker is specifically one, and you mentioned Jack Gibbons, who's kind of come in. Obviously, he's from Abilene Christian, but he's got a ton of experience, a high-level FCS player. I think that's kind of a big one right there. We've been able to we've had 3 open practices, and Alex Carlson on our site, he's been to 2 of those. And he said Jack Gibbons is probably the best linebacker out there. And that's a pretty big spot for Minnesota. That was probably the position defensively they were lacking at the most last year. You also had Braylon Oliver, who's coming back. He was out last year, tore his ACL in the spring, so he was out all of last year. So he's going to be coming back too. You've got him, you got Gibbons, you got a veteran leader like Mariano Morin coming back. So I think defensively, you kind of look at the linebacker position. I think they made some major upgrades in that just because of Oliver coming back, and Gibbons seems to be a player that kind of interested to see, just with the step up in the level of competition and how how he'll turn out for Minnesota. But so far, so good in practice. He seems to be standing out. But I think, you talk about Pinckney, you talk about there's another guy, Val Martin from NC State. They got those are kind of interior guys that they kind of wanted to solidify that interior a little bit more and get a little bit more depth there. So you've got Niles Pinckney, who's a 2-time captain from Clemson, and Val Martin, who's going to be probably a rotational guy. I think Pinckney's definitely going to be in the starting rotation at D tackle there. So yeah, I mean, I think they definitely they upgraded in the positions they needed to. Just kind of curious if everybody else will gel. But I think, last year when you saw like COVID and injuries kind of hit, they played a lot of young people that didn't have a lot of experience, particularly going back to that linebacker position. They played a true freshman, to start the Michigan game. And, he started at the beginning of the season. So kind of thrust into a position he wasn't really expecting to. And, you kind of saw those freshman blues right out the gate in terms of just, open field tackling and stuff like that. So you got guys like that, like Cody Lindenberg is the guy I'm specifically talking about. He's got experience under his belt now, so he can kind of come in and be a rotational guy this year, and he has that experience under his belt as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. They plugged the holes necessary in transfer portal. And obviously kicker, too, is another one, a kicker and punter. I mean, they got some transfers there. They just named Matthew Trickett as the starting kicker this week. So he's going to be the starting kicker. He's from Kent State, and obviously he did some pretty good things there. I think he was an all-MAC performer there. So, and obviously kicking blows kind of reared its ugly head, specifically in Maryland, in the Maryland game last year in overtime, and in the Wisconsin game as well. So definitely looking to shore those things up. So you kind of look at the transfers they've definitely added. It was a pretty good transfer haul just in terms of filling positions of need. So we'll see if it all gels together whenever the season starts against Ohio State.
Let's kind of start on the defense, because I think everybody, when they want to talk about Minnesota, wants to start on the offense, obviously with Tanner and Mo and everything else over there. But, we're talking about a defense that was 72nd in the nation in total defense, was allowing 207 yards a game on the ground, was allowing 30 points a game. Just, it certainly was not the type of defense that people were expecting. I mean, I don't know if expecting is the right term or whatnot, but it wasn't what people wanted. We'll put it that way. And certainly the run defense. And you talk about, Niles Pinckney, up front, a space eater in terms of, whether he's a 3-tech, 1-tech, and then adding Gibbons at linebacker or whatnot. I mean, was this team, was one of their major shortcomings, honestly, just that they couldn't stop the run last year? Because, you look at the passing, their team passing efficiency defense was not great. Passing yards allowed, though, they were only allowing about 208 a game, but that's because they were allowing 207 on the ground. So I mean, at that point, you're giving up 415 yards, and you're going 3-4 on the season. So I mean, is the run defense like the biggest thing that needed to be addressed on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I'd say for sure. They had some issues in the secondary, but I think just the front seven got a lot better. And I kind of talked about the linebackers just a while ago, but specifically defensive line, they didn't get a lot of sacks last year. They didn't, I think they could have, they didn't get a lot of pressure too, obviously stopping the run. There was a lot of holes, there in the middle, specifically in the middle of the field. So, that's why you enter guys like Niles Pinckney and Val Martin into the fold, guys that are experienced, that are space eaters in the middle. They can hopefully plug those holes up. And you've got talent on the defensive end. You got Boye Mafe. I mean, he was Minnesota's leading sack guy last year. He had 4.5 sacks. But I mean, after Boye Mafe, I think the next guy that had the most sacks on the team was like 1.5. So just not a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and obviously some holes that opposing offensive lines opened up in the middle. So you've got guys like Pinckney Martin coming in to kind of help fill those gaps and hopefully plug some holes and stop that running game, which obviously, a lot of teams exploited last year against them.
When you look at this season and game one, I mean, obviously staying on the defensive side for Minnesota, Ohio State's breaking in a new quarterback, but probably has the best 1-2 punch at receiver in the nation with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. doesn't necessarily have a returning starter at running back with the departure of Trey Sermon. Obviously, Master Teague had trotted out there, a good amount early in the season last year. Probably underperformed compared to what expectations were. Seems by all accounts has had a tremendous offseason. Looks like he's really poised to do well, but Mayan Williams, Trevion Henderson, Marcus Crowley, Evan Pryor, just want to make sure I mention them all so I don't hear about it. They've got a stable of running backs. Do you see Minnesota really just trying to sell out the best it can to stop the run and force CJ Stroud and the passing game to beat them? Or, how would you see Minnesota trying to attack Ohio State in this one, as there are, a couple of key new insertions into the lineup, most notably CJ Stroud?
Yeah, honestly, I would think that would probably be the approach. Sell out, try to stop the run game, get as much pressure as you can on Stroud, see if he can perform under the bright lights in prime time. Obviously, you kind of mentioned it in talking to you earlier. He hasn't thrown a pass in college yet. So, obviously, you're going to have fans at the stadium, and Minnesota hasn't had that a lot. They didn't have it hardly at all last year due to COVID. So, the atmosphere is going to be a little bit different there. Everybody's going to be super excited to be back in that stadium. It's going to be loud. I think if you're Minnesota defensively, you try to sell out up front, plug the run game, stop the run game. Obviously, you're going up against a very talented offensive line with Ohio State, but try to get as much pressure as you can on Stroud, see if he makes some mistakes, and you try to capitalize on them now. The secondary, you've got Coney, with Minnesota, you got Coney Durr back there. Obviously, he's a veteran leader. And, didn't have the greatest year last year, but, he's a guy that's capable of being an all Big Ten performer. Terrell Smith seems to be the guy that's going to be the opposite cornerback from Coney Durr. He's got some leaps. He's got some athleticism. He's 6'1". Safety was kind of a position last year that kind of, was kind of a down year on both guys. Jordan Howden kind of had a down year, but he's a veteran that's going to be coming back. So is he going to be improved last year? Tyler Newman has a ton of experience. He's a 4-star kid coming out of high school. Struggled a little bit last year, but he's definitely got the talent to kind of step up and have a big year. Now, that's going to be kind of the question marks with those two guys. You've got the corner opposite of Durr, and you've got the two safety positions with Howden and Newman, and will those guys be able to stop, the talented receiver group of Ohio State? That's going to be interesting to watch in terms of matchups. But yeah, I think Minnesota should, try to sell out, stop the run, get to CJ Stroud, force him to make some mistakes. Being it is like his first, big game in prime time and everything. That's definitely the way you should go. I think Minnesota will try to grind this out and try to make it a low scoring game and try to be, you got to be in it in the fourth quarter if you got a chance to, even if you're down like 7, if you're within a touchdown game going into the fourth quarter, you give yourself a chance to win, I guess.
We'll get into the Minnesota offensive side of the ball here in a second, but let me ask another question that I don't know if we really know how to answer it, but the weather forecast for Minneapolis is about a 50% chance of rain on Thursday. Things can change. We don't know. They're saying, that storms could be an issue, though. Who does that benefit more? Does that benefit Minnesota, who has an established running back with Mo, or Ohio State, maybe with not the same established names in terms of the offense, at running the ball? Who do you think it benefits a little bit more?
Man, that's a great question. I almost kind of would. I would almost give the advantage to Minnesota just because of the production of Ibrahim, but we don't talk a lot about the guys behind him. There are talented guys behind him in Cam Wiley and Trey Potts. They just didn't get a lot of carries last year because, Ibrahim just, was reliable and he was productive, so he was able to eat the clock, and that's something Minnesota really likes. They love the ball control game. They want to win time of possession. Coach Fleck's always big about time of possession being a balanced offense, and he always wants to win that time of possession battle every game. So yeah, they just gave the rock a lot to Ibrahim. But you saw, Cam Wiley, Trey Potts, they kind of came in. There was a point in the season where, in one game, Ibrahim, had a little bit of an injury issue, and they came in, had some really good carries, but they just didn't have a lot of it. So I think it's kind of a toss-up, though. I mean, you got Master Teague for Ohio State that's coming back, and I mean, look, he's had a good career there. You mentioned, maybe he hasn't had the career a lot of people, or at least last year was kind of a down year for him. But I mean, he's been productive, and obviously, Ohio State's got some talent behind him too. But I guess overall, if I was to flip a coin, maybe I give the advantage to Minnesota just because of Mo Ibrahim and the production he's had throughout his career.
What is it that makes Mo Ibrahim so dynamic? And here's one thing, as I was doing research from the Ohio State side of things, that kind of jumped out to me. It's been a minute since these two teams have played. 2018, Mo rushed for, I think it was like 152, 158, something like that on 23 carries. Not a lot of backs can sit there and say that they go for more than 100, certainly more than 150 against Ohio State. It's kind of few and far between. Ohio State only gave up more than 150 yards twice last season. The opener against Nebraska, where they gave up like 207, if I remember. And I think they gave up in the low 150s against Alabama. Granted, they also the Crimson Tide was able to throw it at will on the Ohio State defense. But what stands out about Mo?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing just watching him last year was just, he's running behind a very experienced offensive line. I mean, I think that, Minnesota's got like 8 guys on that offensive line that at least have one start, and have a lot of significant playing time. So that's one thing. But I mean, he's really good. He doesn't have that breakaway speed in the open field, but he's really good with his vision, his footwork, especially when he gets the ball. He finds the holes. And he's got that quick burst speed. Once he sees a hole, he's going to hit it hard. And he'll get you that 7-8 yards. He's not. And then sometimes he'll break off and get you a 20-yard run. Now he's not going to run down the seams and hit 80. But I mean, he's just really good in between tackles. He's really hard to tackle, and he's good at finding those holes. And I think you heard a lot of people last year that defensive coordinators and head coaches that played against him. He's kind of a smaller back too, so he's really hard to kind of see whenever he does get the ball among the offensive linemen. So, but he's really hard to tackle too. He's got good lower body strength, and he keeps those feet moving whenever he that initial contact. So, yeah, he's just got really good bursts, man. He hits the holes and he hits it hard, and he's got really good bursts. So that's kind of the things that really stick out about him.
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, Tanner Morgan, we look at 2019, 66% completion percentage, 30 touchdowns against 7 picks, throws for more than 3,250 yards. Then we go to 2020. And granted, you play less games. He only played, Minnesota played 7 games. His completion percentage falls about 8 points down to 58%, 7 touchdowns against 5 picks. His quarterback rating, the way that ESPN does it, down 50 points, 49 and change. What was different? I mean, was it as much of a situation of not having like a number one like Rashad Bateman, or, why such a drastic, maybe step back? And how does he go forward here in 21? Does he have the offensive weapons around him to have more of a 2019-like schedule or season, as opposed to what we saw last year?
Yeah, that's a huge question. And, I think last year, you had Bateman to start the year, and obviously Bateman opted out the last 2 games of the season. But it seems like, last year he was really keying in on Bateman a lot, it seemed, especially in those early games where he was kind of waiting for Bateman to get open. And he held the ball a little bit too long in those situations and got sacked. And I think that was kind of a key, trying to see who would kind of step up and be that number 2 next to Bateman. And, I think Chris Altman-Bell is a guy that really kind of eventually did emerge as kind of that number 2 guy. But Morgan didn't throw the ball to him a whole lot last year, in the beginning of the year. It seemed like he was keying a lot on Bateman. Obviously, Bateman's a huge playmaker for you. Yeah, you want to try to get him the ball as much as possible, but it seems like a lot of times it was trying to be forced. And then you saw when Bateman opted out the last 2 games, Altman-Bell really kind of stepped up and took over that number 1 role. So yeah, I mean, I think it was just for Morgan, it was more of, kind of keening on Bateman a little bit too much, holding on to the ball a little bit too long in those situations, and maybe just not situations where it was just he was looking for Bateman. But yeah, he's got to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. And honestly, you can kind of maybe, go back to, the COVID year. You've got a new offensive coordinator, Mike Sanford Jr. You didn't have a full spring practice. I mean, you barely put together a little bit of a fall practice. I was kind of limited with COVID and everything. So I think maybe those were a little bit of factors too. So it'll be interesting to see, how much he will gel under Mike Sanford Jr. going into that second season with him being the offensive coordinator there. In terms of his weapons, that's an interesting question. I mentioned Chris Altman-Bell, who's back this year, but he tweaked his ankle in practice a couple of weeks ago. Kind of listed initially out indefinitely. Now Fleck's kind of saying he's day-to-day, not really sure if he's going to be able to go against Ohio State. That's going to be big for them because when you talk about Altman-Bell, when you go past that, there's not a lot of production from the wide receivers in Minnesota. You had Daniel Jackson, who was a true freshman last year. He caught 12 passes. And you don't have a lot of production after that. Michael Brown-Stevens is a guy that was mentioned by Fleck a couple of times this year that's really stepped up. He's a veteran guy. I think he might emerge as like a number 2, number 3 type of guy as well. They brought in Dylan Wright. We were talking about transfers earlier. Dylan Wright's kind of a transfer they brought in from Texas A&M. He was a highly rated kid coming out of high school. But he's a young guy. Is he ready to kind of step up and be in a role like that? So the weapons definitely is something to kind of keep an eye on. And if Chris Altman-Bell is not rolling out there against Ohio State, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher for Morgan in that game on Thursday.
Obviously, Ottman-Bell's presence in the game is going to mean a lot. What does Minnesota need to do? What is the ideal situation for Minnesota to be able to, they're about a 2-touchdown home dog. What do they need to do to shock the world?
Kind of goes back to what I said earlier, and you kind of talked about Mo Ibrahim running for 150 plus on Ohio State. Now, granted, that was back in 2018, but it needs to really be a game similar to that. If you go back to that game, it was kind of a grind game, kind of low scoring. Minnesota was kind of in it there until the fourth quarter. So, I think offensively, defensively, I kind of mentioned it. I think you go after Stroud, you kind of go all out, try to stop that run game, try to get to Stroud, force him to make some turnovers. And, in the situation he's going to be in, obviously a first-time starter and throwing his first college pass and everything like that on Thursday night. I think offensively for Minnesota, they just got to rely on Ibrahim. Hopefully he has a good game. You can get some first downs in the run. Tanner Morgan makes the proper throws on third down and is able to convert some third downs, keep the ball moving, and just stay in it until about the fourth quarter, and then, kind of throw all your cards out there on offense and defense and try to go out and win it. So, that's kind of the good, Minnesota doesn't want to be one-dimensional, like I said, they want to be a balanced offense. So, but that kind of starts with, it seems like it starts with Mo Ibrahim now, and if Altman-Bell's not out there, that's going to be kind of the game changer offensively for them.
So we talked about what needs to happen for Minnesota to pull off the upset, but what do you see happening? And I always hate playing the prediction game, especially, little inside tip. We never record these the day that they air. We recorded a couple of days in advance, so things can change. So bear with us, but kind of how do you see things going down?
I actually talked about this earlier on our podcast for our side. I kind of see Minnesota keeping this close, but ultimately in the end, I think Ohio State's going to just have too much firepower. And I honestly think it'll be a 38-34 game. I think Ohio State will win 38-34.
Wow. Message board communities throughout Ohio will burn to the ground if this is a 4-point game. Let me tell you. My prediction will be out there on the internet as well. Probably not as close. I am picking Ohio State as well. Sean, I really want to thank you for being part of the show. I'm going to give you a minute. Anything that we didn't touch upon, any pearl of wisdom that you want to share with our listening audience before we wrap it up?
No, man, Kevin, I think we really honestly hit everything that everybody needs to know just in terms of Minnesota. Um, Yeah, and appreciate you having me on the site, man. And obviously, it's going to be a nice little game. It's going to be kind of the second year that Minnesota kicks off their season in prime time against one of the Big Ten Blue Bloods. So I'm sure the fans will be really excited about that. And a lot of optimism for Minnesota. I don't know if that optimism is going to start off on the right foot right away going against Ohio State, but it'll be interesting to kind of keep up with the Gophers throughout the season and see how that goes. So either way, excited for football season to start for sure.
Absolutely. And once again, you can see that game on Fox, your local Fox affiliate, 8 p.m. kickoff Eastern time, 7 o'clock local time. We are looking forward to it. Once again, Sean, thank you for being part of the show. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening. Once again, I'm your host, Kevin Noon. We will come up with some better branding for this show by next week, I promise. We're kind of in a bit of a transitional period right now. But for one final time, thanks again, and we will talk to you again here very soon. Thanks for watching. Be sure to click on that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing, and come visit us over at BuckeyeGrove.com for all the best Ohio State information on the web.